go ahead and get started. I will go ahead and pass it off to Tessie to talk. You can put in the Q&A. I will answer what I can, and we'll go from there.
Good evening, everybody. Technology is not my thing, so hopefully we can make this work. So some of the information I'm going to present tonight will be just for seniors, and some of it will be for underclassmen as well. Because the FAFSA is brand new this year, there are a lot of things that we don't yet know, so bear with us. We're going to be taking this trip together. And I cannot get the screen to advance. All right, let's try. Like I said, technology is not my thing. So one of the most important things we hope that you'll take away from this is just a basic understanding of what financial aid is, what some of the terms are, what some of the different forms are, and a little bit of a timeline as to when you need to do all the things that need to be done. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the cost of attendance, or COA. The cost of attendance is the amount it will cost to send your child to school for 1 year. Now, almost all of us are familiar with the things like tuition and fees, and what used to be called room and board is now called housing and food. But there are also indirect costs, which would include books and supplies, personal expenses, money to do your laundry, shampoo, things that you need on a personal level. And it also includes transportation expenses. If your child is going to Nova or Mason, it may not be a big deal. But if your child wants to go to Pepperdine in California, then you really do need to factor in transportation costs for them to come home either at the beginning and end of the school year or for vacations. So let's look at what the cost of attendance is for certain schools. Here are some schools. Hopefully you can see them. I'll just read them very briefly. These are several Virginia public schools. Virginia Tech, $37,000. UVA, $37,000. Longwood, almost $35,000. You'll also see that we have Northern Virginia Community College there at a price of about $20,000. Now, for those of you who know Nova, you'll know that the Nova tuition is roughly $7,000 a year. But as I said before, the cost of attendance does factor in those indirect costs like food and housing. And Northern Virginia Community College has added a factor for that to come up with the $20,000. Here's the cost of attendance for several private schools, both in and out of the state of Virginia. You'll notice that the University of Richmond, I think, is probably the highest in the state, is $81,000. Wake Forest, $87,000. And here are some out-of-state public schools that are very popular with kids in Fairfax County Public School. Penn State at $50,000. West Virginia University is probably the quote-unquote bargain school at $40,000. Now, we know that a lot of times parents will say to the students, we really want you to stay in-state and go to a public school so the cost will be less. But some of these schools really, really like to have kids from Fairfax County attend their schools. So they will offer substantial grants to have Fairfax County Public School students attend their schools. And oftentimes you can attend one of these schools for the same price as attending an in-state public school. So we're going to talk a little bit later in the presentation about how you can find out what kind of an award package you might get at one of these schools before you get an award letter. So where do the funds come from that pay for college? Well, the federal government believes that the cost of post-secondary education is really a family and parental thing that should be required. So for many people, the cost comes from your salary. It could come from savings. It could come from other assets that you may have, like a Virginia 529 plan, or it could come from future earnings, and which would be primarily a student loan or a parent loan. So where do these financial aid packages come from? They can come from the federal government, from state government, colleges and universities, private foundations, civic and religious groups, and employers and private companies. Those last three are primarily scholarship places where you can find money to help pay for college. There are basically four types of financial aid: grants, scholarships, work study, and loan. Grants, for the most part, either from the school or from the state or the federal government, are monies that you do not have to pay back. Scholarships are also usually monies that you do not have to pay back and are awarded because of merit or some other criteria. Work study. There is a question on the FAFSA that asks, do you want to be considered for work study? Work study is basically part of financial aid that can be awarded by the college. It is a part-time job on campus for students. It's usually few hours a week, not a lot, and usually at minimum wage. If you do not click the box on the FAFSA that says, I am interested in work study, they will not offer it to you. However, if you do click the box and it is offered to you, you do not have to accept it. And of course, the very last option is loans. It could either be a student loan or a parent plus loan. Now, I know a lot of parents said, well, my kid can just borrow the money and he can go ahead and pay it back after he gets out of college. If you remember what the cost of attendance for many of those schools are, here's a point you should consider. The maximum student loan for a freshman year is $5,500. That's certainly not going to pay the cost of attendance, even at a Virginia public. Parents can borrow up to the entire cost of attendance, but the loan rates for parents is higher than it is for students. And again, we talked about that gift aids are grants that do not have to be paid back. They can be based on need or merit. The federal government grants are definitely based on need, as are the Virginia state government grants. One of them, and I think can't remember if it's the VTAG or the VCAP, is an award that's given to students who are attending a private college in Virginia. And of course, colleges and universities, in addition to giving financial aid, may have their own set of scholarships. Students should check the financial aid page of a college they're interested in attending to see if there are any scholarships that they may be eligible for, and whether or not just by applying to the school they will be considered, or whether there is an additional application that needs to be filed. Scholarships. We have a whole presentation called Scholarship 101 that deals with scholarships. As I said, they can be merit-based. There could be some other criteria. A couple that we always like to mention is there's a scholarship at a university in Pennsylvania that is for left-handed students. The duct tape people have a scholarship for a student who creates a prom dress out of duct tape. So there are lots and lots of options. Again, can be awarded by colleges and universities or private foundations. Also, employers. Students should ask their parents to see if the company that they work for may offer scholarships. We know that Verizon in the past has offered scholarships for students of their employees. Probably the best resource for students to look for scholarships is their high school, college, and career center specialist. Hopefully, parents, you are aware of something called Naviance, which all students know about and use. The Naviance scholarship database is probably one of the best going on. And there is a parent access to Naviance. Your students can help you access it. And both you and your student can search that database for scholarships. It is searchable, and there are some scholarships, although not a lot, for underclassmen as well. And like I said, colleges and university financial aid offices are also another good source. There are also scholarship websites, and several are listed on our webpage. Do, however, be aware that there are often scholarship scams going on. If anyone asks you for a credit card or for some amount of money to help you do a scholarship, know that it is a scam. Any scholarships that they can pull up are coming from the web, and you can certainly find them on your own. If the student receives an outside scholarship, and this is particularly for the seniors in the room, you must notify the college or university of any scholarship that you receive. The colleges will sometimes use that money to offset any money that they may be giving to you. Sometimes they will offset the parent contributions. Sometimes, and all of us think this is very unfair, they will use it to offset any aid that they may have been planning to give the students. You should call the financial aid office of the school that you're thinking about attending if you get a large scholarship, and ask them, will they offset it against aid they are giving, or will they apply it to funds that the parents need to contribute? For those students going to Nova and maybe one or two other schools in Virginia, if you are over awarded, i.e. you get more in grants and scholarships than the cost of attendance, some schools will refund that money directly to the students, but most will not. You may ask that they carry the scholarship over into a second year if you have more money than you need to pay for the cost of attendance. We already talked about work study a little bit. It's on a first come, first served. It goes directly to the student at the college or the university. And again, this is not intended to help defer the cost of tuition and other direct costs. It is really a very minimal amount of money that just helps the students with some incidental costs. And I will date myself in that I had a work study job when I was in college, and we put hard copy mail into mailboxes. But it may be helping in the kitchen, it may be working a front desk, it may be working with a professor. Again, if you don't check the box on the FAFSA, you will not even be offered a work study job. As I said, there are loans that are available. The loan rate changes July 1st of every year. These are the rates for the 22 to 23 school year. This has not, I guess, been updated. There is a rule of thumb that says to borrow as little as possible. If you are going to school and you're going to be a CPA and the first year's salary of a CPA is $60,000, then throughout the term of your 4 years in college, you should not borrow more than that first year's income, which would be $60,000. We certainly don't want the student or the parent to go deep into debt, just to go to college. So the forms that you need to apply for financial aid, probably the most prevalent one is the FAFSA, the free application for student aid. And note that the first word is free. It is now illegal for anyone to charge you to help you complete the FAFSA. Our services are all free. We have never charged anybody, but again, you don't want to pay anyone. For those students who are not eligible for the FAFSA, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, there is something called the Virginia Alternative State Aid Program, and we'll go into a little bit more detail. Some colleges and universities also have a supplemental form called the CSS profile that is available through the College Board. This year, because the FAFSA is so late in opening, some schools which normally do not request the CSS profile are requesting it because the federal government probably is not going to get information to the schools until the beginning or middle of February. So it's going to be very difficult for schools to determine financial aid packages. So they are asking for information via the CSS profile. That opened on October 1st. And some schools have always requested additional institutional forms. But this year you will probably see more of that again because of the late opening of the FAFSA. So again, the FAFSA is required by almost all schools, colleges, universities. It's also often required for some scholarships. So parents and seniors, you must obtain an FSA ID to even start to complete the FAFSA. There is the website there. You can always just Google FSA ID, but it's student.gov or studentaid.gov where you do it. And here comes Bonnie. You're muted, Bonnie. Okay, she can't hear.
Hi, here I am.
Okay, I'm not even sure I have this right PowerPoint on, so.
Okay, so we were going to do this one for seniors, I believe. So let me go back and can you, but this one, they overlap.
Okay, so, this is the underclassmen one. I am going to duck out of here.
All right, so we have I'm going to check with Holly.
She has juniors and seniors.
All right, so we need both. Okay, very good. So let me, Holly, are you handling the PowerPoint or Tess, are you?
Tess is.
Tess, okay, so are you going to fast forward through it while I speak? Are you going to
yes, I'll go through it.
But
like I said, I'm not even sure I have the right PowerPoint up, so bear with me if it's not.
Okay, so let's go on to the next slide that you're ready. Is this the next slide you're ready to start with?
Yes.
Okay. So hi, I'm Bonnie Davis Horowitz. I'm one of the college, I'm one of the champions with Fairfax or College Access Fairfax. So let's go ahead and continue with the presentation. So FAFSA is a form required by almost all technical schools, community colleges and universities. It is a form. I want to emphasize that it's a form. Sometimes people will say, will I get turned down by FAFSA? FAFSA turned me down. That is not what this is. This is a form used by colleges. The form collects information, and the college will use the information in this form along with the result of this form in terms of it creating a number called the SAI, the Student Aid Index. And they will use that to create your financial aid package. So the most important thing, this is what we're telling everybody because of the delay with the FAFSA this year. Again, if FAFSA normally opens October 1st, at this point in the year, we've done hundreds of them, thousands of them usually. But this is an unusual year, and the FAFSA has been completely redone. And so we are being told it's going to open on December 31st. And that's the best information we have at this time. But one thing that can really help the process is that both students and their parents go and get an FSA ID prior to meeting with us or prior to starting with the form. There's a link here for you to get your FSA ID. And again, usually it's October 1st. And this form is going to collect information for you. It's going to collect information on your income taxes. It's going to collect information on your assets so that all of this information gets fed into an algorithm. And again, it results in something called the Student Aid Index, which is essentially what a college believes a family can afford to pay for a year of post-secondary education. I like to say post-secondary education because, you know, not all students go to a four-year school. Some go to 2 years, a two-year program at the community college. Some students do a 2+2. Some students do a certificate program at Nova that's 3 months long. But as long as it's so all students will complete this form regardless of what their post-secondary education plans are, and it will create a student aid index. So this actually used to be called the expected family contribution. You might see EFC, but now they have changed that to student aid index. And FAFSA is a form completed every year the student is in school. Now this year, students who are seniors will complete the 24-25 FAFSA because that's going to be their freshman year of college. And the FAFSA this year will use those students, those seniors. We will be looking at 2022 taxes, and again, current assets go into this form. Okay, go ahead. Okay, so in order to complete the FAFSA, the student must have a social security number. So in order to complete FAFSA, a student has to either be a citizen or an eligible non-citizen, which would mean that they have their green card already. So you're going to, now the parent does not have to have a social security number, but there is a different process for getting your FSA ID if a parent does not have a social security number. The parent will be asked a series of questions while they're getting the their FSA ID. So again, you need the social security number of the student and their contributing parent. If a parent is not a U.S. citizen, they would need their permanent resident number, or a student would need their permanent resident number. The date of birth of both the student and the parents. Student driver's license is optional. And I always point out to families that I work with that it is optional because it's another piece of data that goes, you know, out into the world. And we have plenty of students who don't even have a student driver's license. So we leave it up to the families whether to enter this number. You can complete it without it. We need the date of the parents' marriage or the date of their divorce, if that's applicable. The date that you moved to Virginia, and that is not necessarily the date you became a legal resident of Virginia. What's the form used to ask whether or not when you became a legal resident, and it was confusing, but it really just wants to know the date you moved to Virginia. And again, those prior year financial records, that federal tax return from 2022, your 2022 W-2 forms or other wage statements. And again, these are for seniors this year. If you're a junior, you're going to be using 2023 tax forms. And then also for military families, the LES for any month. So we're going to need those current financial statements. That would be your checking account, your savings account, any other asset accounts. It could be your college savings plans, your 529 plans, any other prepaid college accounts, your investment records. These would include stocks, bonds, CDs, money markets, Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, everything that would be considered an asset. We would need the current financial statements for those. And again, we have a link here for students and their parents to get their FSA ID. Students are telling me that the process is going really well this year for getting the FSA ID for both the student and for their parent. All right, so these are the assets that you need to report on FAFSA. So if you've heard of CSS profile, that include, they need more information. The assets that we report on FAFSA are pretty basic. So again, as I said earlier, cash, checking, savings, CDs, stocks, bonds, mutual funds. Now, you don't need to report the home that you live in, but if you have an investment home, other than the home you live in, you would need to report the value of that home, your equity in that home. You would need to put in all your 529 plans, other than those owned by people other than the parents. For instance, if a grandparent had one, you would not need to put that in. Coverdell savings accounts, any other qualified education savings plans. And you would use the refund value of the refund value of 529 prepaid tuition plans. You would use put in your UGMA and UTMA accounts for which you are the owner, your stock options, and your installment and land sale contracts. So what do you not include? You do not include the equity in your personal residence. You do not include the value of life insurance. You do not include the value of your retirement plans, your 401k, your IRAs, your Qs, your UGMA and UTMA accounts for which you're the custodian rather than the owner. And again, this is different than the CSS profile, which we'll talk about shortly, which you will need to put in information on your retirement plans.
Bonnie?
Yes?
I have one question that
Yes.
just came in. Are business bank accounts included in what has to be recorded?
There's a place to report the value of your business, or there's a change. So unfortunately, it's one of the things that is newly changed. And so I haven't seen the final screen for reporting your business. One thing, if somebody has like a unique situation like that, we can work with them on the one-on-one session. But it's your Tess, has there been any change to that you in terms of the reporting any business assets? That's not in the form, but you do have to report. There is a change to.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. So
Okay.
the question
So there is a question now that asks for the value of your business. It used to be that you only needed to report it if you had more than 100 employees, but now you do need to disclose the net value of any family business or farm that you have. And if we're hoping that if you click the little question mark next to that particular question, it will give you some more information. There has been very little, if any, guidance coming out of the Federal Student Aid Office as to exactly what they want in that information. We will continue to update you as we get more information. I do want to say before we go on is that we are really at a disadvantage here because the information coming out of the federal government is few and far between. Everything is supposed to be released on December 31st. So we will all be scrambling like crazy to get updated information out as quickly as we can.
right.
I will also add, a few people have asked me, these slides will be available. I will get them out to everybody. The recording will be available. I will also send the information to College Access Fairfax's website so you can set up one-on-one meetings. But for next year, we don't know what that's going to look like either. So if you're a junior trying to figure out if this is going to be available on December 31st or October 1, we don't know yet. Like Tessie and Bonnie had said, this has been a long process that we don't really have a lot of answers to. We're just hoping we cover as much as we can. And then there'll be more presentations you can watch once December 31st comes. But
right. So like normally at this point in the year, we would have a line by line seminar where we actually had true screenshots to talk about every single question and how you would answer it. The information's kind of coming out drop by drop this year. So, but again, we do try to keep things updated on our website. And if someone does want a copy of this PowerPoint, we actually do have a copy on the worksheet page of our website, or the workshop page of our website, if somebody wanted to go there and take a look at it in addition to the recording that will be produced.
This is actually what I pulled up. This is the underclassmen presentation. There is also a more detailed presentation if you're a senior or the parent of a senior, again on our website on the workshop page.
I'll send that link out as well.
Okay, so let's go on and talk about the untaxed income you need to report on the FAFSA. So on the FAFSA, the untaxed income that you need to report will be payments to tax-deferred pension and retirement savings plans, your IRA deductions to DP, Simple, KEO, or other qualified plans, child support received, tax-exempt interest income, untaxed portions of IRA distributions, untaxed portions of pensions, veterans non-education benefits, disability, death, pension, or DIC. Okay, so let's talk about the student aid index. So the student aid index is a federal calculation based on the information that you put into that form, and there's an algorithm. So it takes the income from both parents and the student. It takes assets from the parent and the student. It takes the number of household in the household in account, student, parents other than the children, if the parents provide more than half their the parents' other children, but only if the parent provides more than half of their financial support. And then anyone else who lives with the parents, if the parents provide more than half their support. Now, we do have many families who do send money overseas and help support their family members or their parents. They are not looking to include those folks. So it has to be someone living under your roof to be included in the number in the household. Now, it does ask for the number in college. However, the algorithm does not take that into account starting this year. It used to be that the SAI would be, or that what we used to call the expected family contribution would be divided between the number of kids that were in college for a certain family, and that is no longer the case. So why do they ask it? This is a number that the college may use to award institutional aid. So it does ask that question, but it is not going to go into that student aid index calculation. But they also look at your marital status. They look at the dependency status of the student and the age of the oldest parent. So the student aid index is the determined amount a family has the ability to pay for 1 year of college costs. And then that SAI is actually sent electronically to all the schools that you enter into the FAFSA. Now, this one change they made this year is you can put 20 schools at a time into the FAFSA, which is great because we used to only be able to fit 10. So essentially, those data files go out to the schools. A school is only going to use that data file if they offer you admission. If they offer you admission, they're going to use the information in your FAFSA and your student aid index to create a financial aid package for you. If you are not offered admission, they will not do that. All right, so what happens after you submit the FAFSA? So the student, and I want to emphasize the student here. So this is a student form. It is not a parent form. It's a student form completed with the assistance of their parent with parent information. So the student actually gets this email about 3 to 5 days after they submit the form electronically. The FAFSA will have their FAFSA submission summary. It will have all that information that you've entered into the FAFSA along with that SAI. So that's step one. Then secondly, make sure that you keep copies of the FAFSA submission summary for future reference if you need to go back to it. And then also remember that FAFSA is done every year. You're going to need to keep those FSA IDs in a secure location. You're going to use them every year that the student's attending school to fill out that form. I believe that in future years, I think we can expect it to go back to an October release date. This is just an unusual year. And again, even students who are graduate students complete the FAFSA.
I'm going to jump in here, some late breaking news. Well, normally you would get an email from the federal government 3 to 5 days after you submitted the FAFSA. They have let us know that any student who submits their FAFSA in January will not get their FAFSA completion summary until February 1st at the earliest. And usually, and if for some reason you need to make changes to your FAFSA, you will have to wait until you get that summary from the federal government before you can go in and make any changes. Hopefully, if you submit your FAFSA after January 31st, they will go back to the 3 to 5 day time period. But I have to tell you, most of us are not overly optimistic that this will all happen without any glitches. So bear with everybody. Like I said earlier, we're all trying to learn as we go along.
Now, we fully expect that we're going to have students who need to complete a paper application. If there is a situation, essentially this year, there used to be a way that we could do the form electronically and then sign it on paper. And so they've taken away our ability to do that. So people are either going to be completing it electronically, signing electronically, or they're going to be doing it on paper. And so we do not have the paper forms. We expect to have them the same time that the FAFSA opens. So that's going to be a change for this year that will be sort of a new process for us. So financial aid verification, it is not the same as being audited. Sometimes people get very, very nervous when they see that they need to verify their FAFSA. So essentially, it's a federal financial aid requirement in which the DOE, the Department of Education, Office of Federal Student Aid, requires schools to verify data submitted by about 20% of the total number of financial aid applicants. So it can be random or it can be based on information that's entered. There are schools that do verify 100% of their financial aid applicants. So don't be alarmed if you are selected for verification. Now, again, the student will be the one who is notified that they've been selected for notification to verify that information on the FAFSA. I do recommend that students, they are setting up a separate, they're going to be using their personal email, and I do recommend that they are consistent about using that personal email for FAFSA, for scholarships, for college webinars where you're checking out a college. Consistently use the same email. Some schools do look at what you would say is how many times have they tried to interact with us, and they'll track the email or they'll track those interactions. So I do recommend students have a professional email or professional sounding email that they use consistently. Students need to set up badge notifications on their phone. Those are those little numbers that tell you you have a new email to look at. And again, the reason I mention this is that your student is going to be getting emails related to school, and one of those may be the request for financial aid verification. And if your student does not complete what is needed for verification, and it usually involves uploading documents to demonstrate that what you put in the form is accurate. If you never do that, then you're not going to ever get your financial aid package. You won't be able to finalize the process. So it's just a little recommendation that I always make to students that I work with.
Bonnie, because this is the underclassmen presentation, I told people at the beginning we would kind of jump in and give them, parents of seniors, some additional information. Do you want to talk briefly about the DRT and DDX and the absolute requirement to consent?
Yes. Let's talk about that. So we used to have a direct retrieval tool in FAFSA, and we always recommended that people use it if they could, because it made it much quicker. The process was much quicker. You had less of a chance of getting selected for verification, but people could opt out of it and enter their information into the form manually. There was no requirement that people say agree to doing it. So now they have changed to a system where everyone has to check a little box saying, I agree to use the direct data transfer tool from the IRS. Even if you know that you didn't file taxes, you still need to check the little box. The student still needs to check the little box. If you don't agree to having it pulled, even if you know that there's nothing to pull, you will not be able to have your form processed. You might as well be done. So that is a new requirement in the system. We do recommend that if there's any questions about this, we do recommend you make sure you schedule a one-on-one meeting with us so that we can look at your form with you. But again, that is a pretty notable change this year with the FAFSA, is the way that they're going to pull the tax information into your form. Okay, so VASA is the Virginia Alternative State Aid Application. So earlier on in the presentation, we talked about the requirements for completing FAFSA, that you either need to be a citizen or an eligible non-citizen. Well, we have plenty of students who do not meet the threshold to complete FAFSA. And so in order to enable the students to become eligible for state grants, we have a form called VASA. It's the application that some students will use instead of FAFSA to get those state grants, and they have to be attending a Virginia public college to get those funds. Now, you will never complete both forms. You'll do one or the other. FAFSA is always the preferred form. We always want a student to complete FAFSA because it enables a student to be eligible for federal grants and federal loans and federal work study. It gives you the most options in terms of financing your college education. But if a student cannot complete FAFSA, then we always do recommend that if they're eligible to complete VASA, that they will do that instead. There's actually a little questionnaire on the SHEV website that we've put the link to here, which will help a student determine which is the right form for them. So sometimes a student will ask me, well, what happens if I do VASA and then my green card comes later on? I do get my green card this year before I'm starting college. Then you will complete FAFSA and the school will use FAFSA instead of VASA. Again, you won't complete both forms. You would just complete an additional form if your situation changed and you did become eligible for FAFSA during the year. So again, there's also students who cannot complete either form, including VASA. So to complete VASA, if you can't complete FAFSA and you want to see whether or not you can complete VASA to get state grants, you do need to have attended a Virginia high school for 2 years. It doesn't have to be 2 years in a row. It just has to be 2 years. You have to be on track for graduation. Your parents have to have filed income taxes for at least 2 years. Again, you need to be going to a Virginia public college or university. And there are certain visas that are not acceptable for completing VASA. In order to complete VASA, you do need to either meet the domicile or tuition equity provision requirements for your school. That means that you're going to be paying in-state tuition. And your admissions office will have more information on getting in-state tuition. It does not happen at the financial aid office level. All right, so we mentioned the CSS profile earlier. CSS profile will be done in addition to FAFSA, and it's used by about 250 colleges and universities. It's owned by College Board. It asks many more questions. It delves much deeper into your financial situation. They ask many more questions about your assets, about your retirement accounts. They will ask you to project income from future years. So it is definitely not a quick form. So the old FAFSA, we could finish a FAFSA form in about 35 minutes if everybody had what they needed in place. Each college is also allowed to submit specific questions to the CSS profile. So the length of time it takes you to complete it may be determined by how many schools you're applying to that require CSS profile. So there are 6 schools currently that require it in the state of Virginia. That's William and Mary, Christendom, Patrick Henry, University of Richmond, University of Virginia, Washington and Lee University. But there are many, many more schools. And you can think of the schools that require it as the schools that are maybe considered more competitive, that have large endowments, schools that award a lot of institutional merit aid. So how do you know what schools? If you actually just go into a search engine and put in CSS profile, it will actually take you to the link. It's a purple page, you'll know you're there. And if you scroll down just a little bit, there's actually a button that says, you know, which schools require CSS profile. So if many of our seniors have already completed the CSS profile, depending on what type of application they did to their colleges, it opens usually the same exact time as FAFSA, but it did open this year, October 1st. Now, a student will just use that same College Board account that they use for other things at school, whether it's taking the PSAT, the SAT, whether it's taking an AP course. So you don't need to create a new account or ID the same way you do with FAFSA. If a family has an income of less than $100,000, they can fill out the CSS profile for no cost. However, a family with income over that amount pays $25 for the first CSS profile report and then $16 for each subsequent report. All right, some schools actually have another form. I was working with a student a few weeks ago who was applying to University of Chicago, and they had a form that you could use instead of CSS profile. That was their institutional form. So how do you know what forms and what deadline dates your school is going to require? So one thing I would like to emphasize is every single school is different. Every school has their own way of doing things. They have their own deadlines. Have their own types of application forms, whether it's early decision 1, early decision 2, early action. Each school has pretty much their own way of doing things. So I always tell students to make sure that they go to the financial aid page for every school that they are considering and bookmark it. That page is really important. So it will have the forms that are required. It will have the deadlines. It also has the net price calculator, which we'll talk about in a little bit because it's one of the most important things you're going to hear about tonight. Okay, so let's look at the determination of financial needs. So the college is going to use that student aid index that came from the FAFSA to determine financial need. So essentially it's the cost of attendance. And again, that's your tuition, your room and board, your other fees, everything that goes into the cost of attendance in a given year. Subtract out that student aid index, subtract out any financial assistance in addition that you are receiving, and it equals your financial need. Some families will end up with a negative SAI, but just if you do end up in that situation where you see a negative, treat it like a 0 in terms of calculation of financial need. So financial aid awards may meet full financial need if a college has a large enough financial reserves. However, a gap may remain. A gap often remains, and schools cannot always meet that gap. Often that gap is filled with loans. So once the student's been accepted, he or she is going to get a financial aid letter outlining how the financial need will be addressed, whether it's grants or scholarships, work study, or loans. So again, gift aid is grants and scholarships. We want to maximize grants and scholarships. We want to minimize loans. All right, so I was talking earlier about the net price calculator. So at this point, you've heard a lot of the lingo that we use in financing post-secondary education, and your students they're crafting their college list, and it's going to include some schools that are their meat schools. They feel like they are good candidates for their school based on their grades and on their testing and maybe what the major is going to be. And then we have safety schools, which are schools that they feel very confident that they're going to get in. And then we have our reach schools. And so the reach schools are a little bit, there's no certainty a student will get into those. So usually the college and career specialists will say to students, let's make sure it's a balanced list. Sometimes students will maybe have 7 schools in that list, sometimes more, sometimes less. But most students, if I do a little survey of students that I work with and I say, well, how are you going to go about selecting schools? They all pretty much say similar things. They say, well, my grades, my scores, where is it? What's my major? But very rarely do they talk about whether or not it is a good financial fit. A school is not a good fit for family if it's not a good financial fit. And parents have a lot of trouble often speaking to their students about what their family can afford. It's a lot of times a parent will say to a student, well, just apply to these schools, and if you get in, we'll figure it out then, or we'll look at it later. And it's really the worst thing a parent can say to a student for many reasons, primarily because a student can end up with getting into a dream school that is not a good financial fit for their family, which will not only put a strain on their financial resources while the student is in school, but often leaves families and students with a very large financial bill after graduation. So how do you know which schools are a good financial fit? So there's something called the net price calculator on the financial aid page of every single college. They usually have their own. You usually do not have to use the federal ones, but you can. But each school will have a net price calculator. It's a fairly quick process. It will ask you a lot of the same questions that FAFSA asks you. And it will tell you about what your financial aid package is going to look like. And so it's a really, really important thing to do. It's usually accurate within a few $1,000s, I'm told, from families. So my advice to parents out there is do not wait to have conversations with your student about what your family is comfortable paying for college. Use the net price calculator and go into it with a realistic idea of what that financial aid package is going to be. Don't wait until you have that offer of admissions sitting there and your student already envisions themselves there and the parent is surprised at what the financial aid package looks like, that it's not as generous maybe as they were expecting. There are many strong students, and a lot of times parents mistakenly make the assumption that good, strong grades always equal good merit aid. That is not always the case. So again, if you take away anything from this presentation tonight, please ask your student what schools they're considering and sit down together and run the net price calculator on all of these schools that you're looking at. So we have a list here of some financial aid calculators you can use, but again, bookmark that financial aid page. You're going to want to go to it for not only for the deadlines, not only to look for merit aid possibilities that are on that page, but again, also to use that net price calculator. All right, so we have some dates. Again, October 1st is our typical date, but I think you can pretty much, even though the form is opening December 31st, we at College Access are going to be starting our one-on-one meetings with students and families. Probably we're going to be opening up our appointments January 2nd because we'll be on holiday break until then. So how do we work those sessions? We try to be really flexible with families. We can do virtual sessions. We have some of our champions will do in person. I personally feel that when we do virtual Zoom sessions, that it's a really great process for both the family and for the parents and the student, because they can make sure that they have all the documents right there and can get all the questions answered. We have a much higher likelihood of completing a form in one sitting. I like to complete a form in one sitting because 45 days after you begin it, it disappears completely. Sometimes a student will miss that, and then we have to start over again. So again, we try to be flexible. We try to work with whatever works best for your family to get them done. Now, a lot of Virginia colleges have priority deadlines for both completion of FAFSA and CSS profile. You will see those priority deadlines on that financial aid page for each college. Many Virginia colleges typically have a priority deadline of March 1st. Your admissions decisions will arrive. Your financial aid decisions will arrive later than usual. National College Decision Day is May 1st. That's when you let your college know of your choice. And then the college will ask for its first payment due at the end of July.
I'm going to jump in here. It is entirely possible that some schools will push their priority filing deadlines out, make them later than March 1st, because of the time crunch of really only having January and February to try to complete the FAFSA. As Bonnie has mentioned, the best place to find out whether those dates will change is the college's financial aid page. I have even heard talk that they may push back decision day. I mean, this is really just such an incredibly unique year, and we really have so little information on how to go. In addition to being able to get a one-on-one help, we also have probably 15 or 18 FAFSA completion dates and sites that are available on our calendar. You can come to one of those sites and we will help you just as if we would have helped you on a Zoom call. Please don't everybody ask for a one-on-one Zoom call, because we have a very limited number of staff members. And again, because we've lost virtually 3 months, we probably will not get to everybody if everybody asks for a one-on-one meeting. We would also ask that you at least start to try to do the FAFSA on your own before you request a one-on-one. There are going to be a couple of rules for those of you who are doing one-on-one sessions. Pretty much you should have both the student and the parent FSA ID before you start. There is probably going to be at least a 3-day delay between when you apply for your FSA ID and when it is verified by the Social Security Administration. So you are not going to be able to do both, getting your FSA ID and your FAFSA form in the same session. And the other thing, and I know this, a couple of people have said this sounds harsh, if you are unwilling to check the box that you consent to having the direct data transfer with the IRS, please do not make an appointment. Your FAFSA is not going to go anywhere. We have, like I said, limited resources, and it really is not fair to anyone if your FAFSA is just going to sit there and not be processed because you will not click the consent button. I'll be the ogre on this one, Bonnie. You don't have to.
All right. Okay, so I can't say enough good things about our college and career specialists at our school and our counselors. They care deeply about your students. They are available. Please have your students stick their head into the Career Center during lunch to introduce themselves. They work really hard, and the number of things they do is just, I think, would surprise somebody if they weren't familiar with them. They are the greatest resource for, you can go to the College and Career Center for looking at not only just majors and college and things like that, but also scholarships. And they can help advise on whether it's a first generation scholarship or a scholarship that is specific to a certain high school. Please use that resource. Fairfax County Public Schools is really fortunate. If you look nationwide at other places, like many school districts do not have that resource. And so we are really fortunate, and it's a good place to start if you're just starting out. Again, we have lots of financial information workshops coming up. And I'm going to actually, as soon as we get through the next slide, I'm going to take you to our website because I want to show you how to navigate there and where you might find some important things that will help you get started if you're starting to think about your student needing some scholarships. So I just want to have you take a look at that before we close out the session tonight. So we just have one more slide here. So if you are a military family, we do advise you to contact the school directly. Again, at different schools, they're going to have that information in different places, whether it's the financial aid office or the admissions office or the bursar or the VA office. They're going to be the best resource for you to find out questions about different programs and about how they do things at their school. So if you want to just put up the last slide. So this is how to contact us. And again, we're not going to be opening up our appointment form until the new year. It's not open yet, but you can also ask us questions after this at info@collegeaccessfairfax.org or questions@collegeaccessfairfax.org. Again, the appointment link is not open yet. We have a phone number. We do social media on Facebook. I'm going to actually Tess, do you want to go ahead and just click on
I'm going to stop sharing and then
okay, and then I'll get in.
Okay, and then I'm going to go in and start to try to answer some of the questions that are in the Q&A. So.
Okay. All right. Okay. Holly, can you confirm that you can see this orange and blue screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Perfect. Okay. So this is the College Access Fairfax website, and you can see this orange banner at the top. This is where we put the most recent and important information. And you can see here where it says get an FSA ID. You do not need to wait to be a senior to get an FSA ID, but you know, it's going to probably sit around a while and you might lose the password. So if you are a senior, we hope that you have already gotten an FSA ID. We also have some important information here. This blue link where it says here is if you're going to attend one of our FAFSA completion events, and again, you can attend an event at a school that is not your school. They're open to every Fairfax County Public Schools senior, and I'll scroll down and show you where those are. But again, to know what to bring with you, you're going to click on the word here. All right, so if you scroll down a little bit on this page, you can see, look how many events we have coming up for seniors. These are for seniors because you will not complete the FAFSA or VAFSA until your senior year. But you can see we have them at a lot of high schools. We also are going to have a line-by-line event. So by January 10th, we're going to know what FAFSA looks like because it's going to already be open, and we'll be able to have some good screenshots and be able to talk about the form in more detail. So just notice that there are 2 line-by-line seminars, one on January 10th, one on January 13th, and they are virtual. And these are live, there are links in here. So you do not need to pre-register for any of these events. You would just click on the event and it will take you to a description of the event and it will have a Zoom link. Okay. Another important part of this website is our scholarship page. And I want to make sure that everyone sees that before we exit tonight. So under services, if you go down to scholarships, we have a lot of College Access Fairfax scholarships that are open to countywide. So on the left-hand side here, there are some toggle switches. You just click on it. It describes the scholarship. You can see who it's open to. Tells you the application deadline's February 1st, and there's actually a link to the application. And so if you're looking, these also appear in Naviance, but if you wanted to kind of see them all in one place, we have them here. And then there are also high school specific scholarships that your student might already know about through their College and Career Center specialist. And those are over here, and it says which high school that it's open to on the right here. And these also have toggle switches. Lastly, I want to point out our resources page. There are plenty of resources here for you to take a look at. We have a list of what to bring to a FAFSA or VAFSA appointment, but we also have just some basic information on deadlines, on some financial aid calculators, some scholarship resources. So please make sure you take some time and come to this page. We have seminar recordings. We already have our senior paying for college for seniors seminar recording in here already. And we have a scholarship 101 that will be there soon. I actually have it, but it hasn't been put in the right format yet. If you are going to Nova, we also have some information for our Nova students. So, and again, here's our contact information on the right side of the page here. So let's see how we're doing with the questions.
Oh,
There are a lot of questions about parents who are divorced or separated. So if you want to just quickly cover that, that would be really helpful.
Okay. All right. So one of the biggest changes about FAFSA this year is that it used to be that whichever parent the student spent the most time with was their FAFSA parent. So, and again, we're using the word contributor from now on, but now it's different. It's the parent who provides the most financial support for a student. So you can see, I just Googled who is the parent, FAFSA, who's the parent. It comes up with this nice form where it describes, it's a little bit of it's a flow chart, and it gives you the opportunity to go through it and see who is going to be the FAFSA parent. And if a parent ends up being the FAFSA parent and they are remarried, you actually need the financial information from both that parent and their spouse. So that is a big change we had this year with regard to who will be the contributor for the FAFSA. Now, you only need one of your parents to do FAFSA. College Act or CSS Profile is a little bit different. For CSS Profile, whether or not they need the other parent depends on the college. I'm going to share the screen. Okay. Can you see this purple page, Holly?
yes.
Great. Okay. This is the CSS Profile. And if you go down to check the participating schools and scholarships, it'll tell you which schools require it. A lot of times I like to do a sort by state. It's a little bit easier way to find the schools. So see this column over here where it says CSS Profile non-custodial parent. These schools, you're going to need not only the custodial parent, but you're going to also need the non-custodial parent. It's a lot of them. So this is a really useful drop down to use. And again, you just get to there from the front page of, remember, you won't be doing the CSS Profile unless your school requires it in addition to FAFSA. So did we answer? Okay. And then there's actually this great thing where it says completing the CSS Profile for the non-custodial parent, so you can learn more about it there if you're a family where the parents are divorced.
Bonnie, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay.
No, I can.
All right. So here's the example that I use sometimes, and this gets kind of confusing, but there is a new parent wizard that I think is going to be pretty helpful. You're looking at 2022 taxes. So if the parents were married in 2022 and filed a joint tax return, it becomes complicated when you get divorced. In some cases, if the contributor parent who provides more than 50% has remarried since 2022, it's not a biological father, but it's a stepfather. In those cases, it will be the custodial parent and the step parent who each need to get an FSA ID. If you're in one of those situations, I mean, there are so many different permutations of this that if you are on one of those situations, rather than try to give you a blanket answer, just go ahead and email us and give us the particulars of your situation, and we will tell you who needs to get an FSA ID. But it could be more than just one parent. For example, if both biological parents are living together but are unmarried, then both of those parents will need to get an FSA ID. Like I said, way too many permutations to try to go through them individually. So just kind of reach out if you need are in that situation.
Someone's asking about alimony. You do have to report your child support received. I just had another question where a parent was asking who starts the FAFSA form. Is it the parent who starts or the student who starts? Either one can start, but you do have to, once you do your own section, that form gets electronically emailed, or an invite gets emailed to the other contributor, and then they do their portion. So in the old days, a lot of times parents used to just do the whole thing, or even but that's no longer an option. You actually need to send a formal invite, an email to the other contributor for them to do their section. In order to do that, you need to have some basic information for them. You need to have their social security number and their email, as well as their birth date. Okay, I have a question here about a student's age and whether or not, actually it has to do with a separation. I'll let Tess answer that one in writing. So one thing I'm assuming that Tess talked about earlier is just remember that age does not equal independence when it comes to FAFSA unless a student is 24 years old. It's really outside of what people normally think of as the age that we normally think of as a student becoming an adult. So unless your student is married, has a child, is age 24, is a veteran, is in the military currently, has had homelessness since the summer previous, was in foster care after the age of 13. There's really just a handful of students who are in a situation where they can get to complete FAFSA as an independent. Honestly, I've had over the almost all 99% of the students I work with, if not more, are considered dependent student, which means that they will need their parental information in the form.
The other thing I'd like, again, for parents for seniors is oftentimes we have situations where the child is living with individuals who are not the child's parents. The state of Virginia, the FAFSA form will exempt those students from providing parental information if the child is in a guardianship situation. Virtually every student in Virginia is in a custody situation, and in which case you will still need to provide parental information. If you're in one of those situations, we can help you, but please understand that custody and guardianship are not the same thing.
So what if the parents are not in touch? I think the question here is this, can the student get in touch with the other parent? It's if a parent is completely unreachable, they're going to need to go to the school and see if they can get a waiver for that. If the other parent is, and I guess the question is whether or not you're asking regarding FAFSA or regarding CSS profile. If it's FAFSA, you know, if that parent's not providing the most financial assistance for the student, you know, 51% of the costs incurred in raising that child in a given year. I had a question about what financial assistance means. It means just who's paying for that child to their day-to-day expenses, you know, their living expenses, their food expenses, any other expenses. So whichever parent is at 51% is that parent. If that parent is not, if the parent who can't be reached is not the FAFSA parent, then there's no issue with that. But if it's a CSS profile school that requires the custodial and the non-custodial parent, then the student might need to get a waiver from the college regarding the parent who is not reachable. Okay, oh, I see. Okay, yes. If you, depending on the school, if that non-custodial parent is required, you would have to fill out the paperwork to try to get a waiver on that for that parent not completing CSS profile.
Bonnie, what happens if you have multiple kids in college at the same time? Are they considering that in the new FAFSA? Well, how is that going to work?
Sadly, that's one of the biggest, most important changes for this year. So it used to be that if you had 2 kids in college, that each one would that would be taken into account, and it would the amount that a parent was expected to contribute to college would be divided in half. That is no longer the case. They will ask about your family, but they are not going to, it's not going to impact the SAI anymore. So I know a lot of families are really upset about that. I've had a lot of families who even have twins and triplets who are upset about that, but that is one of the changes. The reason for the changes in the form is really to maximize the number of people who are eligible for Pell Grants. And these are our lower income families. A lot of the changes, that was really the reason for it, is that they want to make sure that those federal dollars go to those who are most in need, the federal grant money. That's really the meat of the form. So unfortunately, for many families, it's absolutely going to impact them, the fact that that is not taken into account any longer. However, it's always possible that your school, if they award institutional aid, may take that information and offer some merit aid, or what we call it institutional aid because it comes from the institution. But again, that would definitely be a question for the financial aid office. So one thing I always tell students is, please don't be afraid to call the financial aid office and ask questions. It will not impact your admissions. They won't think that you don't know things. They won't think that the questions you're asking aren't good questions. The people in the financial aid office are enormously nice. They will pick up the phone. A lot of times students will just send an email, but they actually will pick up the phone. It's a great life skill. If your student is nervous on the phone, like mine were, have them make the phone call with you sitting next to them. You can always write something on a piece of paper if they didn't ask something you want to ask. But again, every single person who's ever called a financial aid office is always a little bit surprised at how incredibly nice they are. They really want to help you. They really want to answer your questions. And it's definitely your best place to go if there's something you're not quite sure about. You always want to arm yourself with information. You never want to guess. So I would definitely reach out as needed.
I want to just add a little bit to that. I work in admissions still while working at Robinson, but I also have worked in admissions full time for years prior to this. It goes very far when a student actually calls themselves, and admissions counselors and financial aid officers rarely hear from students directly, and it's really nice and goes a long way when they pick up the phone and call. And as Bonnie said, it is a life lesson and should really be taken advantage of in this process.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Sorry, it is hard sometimes for parents to let go of the process. They're used to handling all the financial aspects of their children's lives, and this is kind of a really good opportunity for them to just starting to take some ownership of the process. I have a question here about FAFSA being used for student loan applications. So just to clarify how it works. So when you complete FAFSA and you get a financial aid package, that package can include some combination of grants, federal loans, and maybe perhaps federal work study. So the federal loans, if loans are part of that package, students can only take out a certain quantity of loan each year. So for freshmen, the maximum student loan, direct student loan, is $5,500. In their second year, it's $6,500. In their third and fourth year, it's $7,500 each year. That's only $27,500, which, as you know, is not really, doesn't cover tons of college cost. The reason for that is that they don't want students to graduate with huge loan debt. There is nothing worse than graduating college and you can't afford to move out of your parents' house, get an apartment, pay for a car, go to a concert. So that they do have limits on what a student can take out in their own name. But there are also federal loans called Parent Plus loans. And a lot of times if a financial aid package will have a substantial number of those loans as part of the package. So if when you get a financial aid package, you get the option of accepting what's in there or not accepting what's in there, item by item. It's not an all or nothing. So if your student wants the student loans that are being offered to them, they can check the box, and then essentially they do a little bit of an educational seminar for anyone taking out federal loans for both students and for parents. Just know that even if your student put in for work study and they change their mind, they don't have to check that box. So FAFSA is the form used, but the student loan information will actually come from the college and be in that package. Okay.
All right, Bonnie, I think we're going to close this out.
Okay.
And any question that was asked in the RSVP form, Bonnie did take some time today and answer them, and I will be sending out those questions as well. But I think this was a wealth of information, and I know a lot of people are going to be watching the recording. So thank you so much, Tessie. Thank you so much, Bonnie. I really appreciate it. Please do not hesitate to reach out to me or your college and career counselor at your school, and we will go and hopefully get through this FAFSA together.
Thank you, everyone. And if we were unable to answer your question, you can go ahead and send it to questions@collegeaccessfairfax.org, and I will work on them this evening.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you. Good evening.